What should a Jew be doing? You should be sitting. Sitting. Yeshiva means sitting. So we sit and we sit and we sit. You know, that's where Alexander comes in. Teaches how to sit properly, right? But that's why Jews are fat.
You heard that new study that said sitting is as bad as smoking?
No, you said that.
No, there's a study that came out last couple of months that says sitting is as bad as smoking.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah. Even if you sit well. Even if you sit well, good. Sitting is just inherently bad for you. Even if you go like run 6 miles afterwards, you sit 8 hours a day, it's bad for you.
Oh, 8 hours a day.
Even if you do, you know, six miles of jogging afterwards.
Really?
Just sitting hour after hour is just bad.
Well, how come Jews been sitting in basement? Our whole world has always been sitting and learning Torah. So how do you explain that? Why would God?
It hasn't always been our whole world. It's been the whole world of an elite.
No, we're in the desert. Every Jew was sitting and learning all day long. How do you explain that? Of course, we didn't have chairs out in the desert. We probably
have chairs, so
we sat on the ground probably,
or standing up,
or we stood up, right? And then we all moved into Eretz Yisrael, and there was like the huge Torah academies of the Gedolim, right? And I imagine we all sat in there.
But there are no chairs. Like chairs haven't been around for thousands of years.
So what did we sit on back then?
We stood up, or we sat on the floor, or we squatted. Like India, they still squat.
So you're saying like in the great Torah academies, the great yeshivas, like of Rav, like let's say in the times of the Gemara, 1,000 years we're in Babylon learning Torah every day in these academies. That's all the Jews did, was they learned. Talmud says, when the Jews were in Babylon, we could learn all day long. It was like a huge bracha that we went to Babylon. This is the weird part, lady. Wait till you hear this. We didn't have to work for a living because it was not all the food was like subsidized. God gave us like this plentiful amount of food. Why? Because we ate the carobs and the dates that were right there on the trees. Everybody just like went out and took a break, got them, went back in yeshiva. And that's all we ate for 1,000 years was carobs and dates. And I'm thinking Levi would have loved this. You know, he'd been, where's my banana and my almonds? Right?
What's the Shema says? It says when you're walking by the way, when you're lying down, and when you
rise up.
Is that it? That's just
V'shinantam levanecha, that you should teach them to your children. V'dibarta ba'am v'shivtecha v'veisecha, when you should learn them when you're sitting in your house.
Oh, does it say sitting?
V'shivtecha, when you're sitting in your house.
Does it mean on chairs, or could you be squatting?
Wait a minute. In the Talmud, which goes way back, right? In Oral Torah, it talks about a sukkah. And a sukkah has to have enough room. The minimum required for a sukkah is for his rosh, his goof, and his tish. No, it doesn't say a chair. I mean, it says a table. But how do you sit at a table without a chair?
Well, if the table's smaller, that's many places they'll sit around the table. The table's small. Or if it's tall, you stand up or you squat.
I got to look at this. I don't want to talk like out of my backside, but I don't think it says kisei over there. It says it has to have enough room for his rosh, his goof, and his shulchan. But I assumed he was sitting on a chair, but I don't see the word kisei there. So where is kisei? You mean to tell me that you say it's possible that when we were in yeshivas for 1,000 years in Babylon, we did not sit in a chair.
Yeah.
And when we were sitting in the base medrash learning with chavrusas, we were either standing up,
walking,
sitting
on the ground, squatting.
Well, that makes sense because the Torah is oral, so there's no reason to be sitting. You could be walking around memorizing.
Right.
And then the sitting in yeshiva, which means sitting.
Yeah.
Is a modern term. And I got to look this up. And when was the first time we see the word yeshiva?
Well, the yeshiva is a historical, in its current incantation, just goes back to the 19th century. Like as a reaction to the Enlightenment, the great Orthodox rabbis, says we need to pull away from the secular world and create bastions of Torah learning. So like the Lodgian.
Well, but there's so much like stuff written about like the yeshivas of Rava and.
But these
didn't use the
these
words.
were different. These were like people would come for like when it wasn't harvest, and it wasn't like a building and institutions like they built up in Volozhin and other places in the 19th century. You don't hear about fundraising drives to build a new building in the Talmud to house the yeshiva. It's not so much building centered, and we need basketball courts and the migrant laborers are more expensive, and we need a pool. And
yeah. Okay, go ahead.
it's a little different. Okay. So Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 28, do what is right and good in the eyes of God. Jewish law can't cover every possible situation. This is your overall guide to ethical choices. Do what is right and good in the eyes of God.
Wait a minute. It says that God sits on the Kisei HaKavod. That we know for sure it says. It says that God sits on the holy throne.
Sitting's okay for God.
Because he doesn't have the back problems that we have. All right, good for
Back
him.
problems are virtually unknown in places where they don't have furniture.
And you're going to say that originally Torah was given orally so we could walk around, memorize it and stuff. People were on their feet all day. They would like jump into their Nikes and they were ready for learning Torah. And since it's all oral, there's nothing really to sit down and read. So there's no reason to sit. There's no books. You're walking around, you're learning, you're talking. You know what I would really love? I would love to be shown in a vision for 10 seconds.
Yeah.
What did the academies look like in
Right.
the times of when the Jews went to Babylon for 1,000 years? What did
Right.
those academies look like? How did they learn inside of them? I would like to see that, because I've been picturing them all sitting around learning at desks, long tables like they do in yeshiva nowadays. But that may be completely wrong. They may have been just standing around.
Okay, so the chair is according to Wikipedia, is of extreme antiquity and simplicity, though for many centuries and indeed for thousands of years is an article of state and dignity rather than an article of common use. So it was only until the Renaissance that ordinary people started sitting in chairs.
Son of a beehive. Wait a minute. When they had like the Shabbos meals, right?
They would squat or they'd sit on the ground. They weren't all sitting on chairs. Like when they have Shabbos meals in Yemen, like 80 years ago, were they all seated in chairs? I don't think so.
But we
They're
sit on
sitting
the we sit on the ground when it's Tisha B'Av. We don't sit on the ground. Wait, how do you explain a Avelis? How do you explain mourning, where it says you should sit on a low thing?
We'll find out when did those particular laws develop.
As opposed to a high thing. So you had to be sitting on a high thing. Oh, you're saying the.
I don't know when all the particular halakhas of Avelos developed, but they may not go back 3,000 years. There may be a progression of development. Like, for instance, the Kaddish, goes back. It only became the common thing to recite for mourning in the Middle Ages, like the 13th century, 14th, 15th, 16th century. That area, people started saying Kaddish, so there's historical development to some of this stuff.
All right. Could be.
So Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 9, do not pity and do not take compassion on anyone who asks you to worship false gods. I dig this, because the modern mood is that compassion is always right. It's not.
Before we start, I got an idea. You can be your calling. Combine the Alexander information that you have with now your opportunity to learn Talmud and stuff. And you should come out with a thing. Like a book
Alexander technique for Talmud scholars.
Yeah, but also you could talk about the history. You might even want to do a book of chairs in Judaism and talk about when chairs and how they affected halacha and when they came into play and how we were prior to the chairs. Because this is kind of interesting. Because, if this is true, that we did not use chairs in Babylon, I have to take 30 years of what's in my brain, or more than that, and start redoing the tapes.
Yeah, because you had pictures of them all sitting in chairs around the table.
Exactly. It never occurred to me that there were no chairs back then. Okay, go ahead.
So compassion is no